What's happening, gangsters and model makers out there? I am here to finally, after many months, show you a project that I've been working on off and on for a long time. Last summer, I decided that I wanted to build some type of a ground vehicle, sort of as a stick my toe in the water of making armor kind of thing. So I know you're gonna laugh when I tell you this. I decided to build a Jeep. I thought, hey, that's a ground vehicle. I can do all kinds of weathering to it, but there's no tracks involved, which is honestly one of the things that keeps me from actually pulling the trigger and building any armor. But nonetheless, I decided to build a Jeep, and then I decided, well, if I'm going to build a Jeep, I should just do some kind of a little vignette, and that way I can get a little bit of experience with making a diorama base and a little bit of figure painting. What could possibly go wrong, right? The fact that I hadn't done any of those things in about 30 years, that should be no obstacle, right? So anyway, that's what I've done. I decided that I wanted to try and do a little vignette. I came up with a little story in my head of an American GI somewhere in Southern Europe who has to go run an errand in his trusty Willys Jeep, and he gets ambushed. And I wanted to try and tell a little story about that with one vehicle, one figure, and one simple diorama base. So that's what I've done, but before I tell you all about the adventure, let me show you how it turned out. Okay, so there you go. A few pictures of my little ambush vignette. And now I will attempt to tell you how I got there. And this was quite an adventure and quite a learning experience. So there's a lot to say, and I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can without boring you to tears and not forget anything important. I guess I'll start with the figure because there's really probably the least to say about it. But it was the thing that took me the longest to get past because the main thing that I learned about figures is that everybody's scared of them for a reason. I'm not very good at it, and I really suck at painting faces. In fact, I would just love it if someone would invent a decal for that, or even better yet, the equivalent of Edward pre-painted photo etch. I would buy pre-painted figure heads all day long. But right now, the closest you can come to that are Hornet heads, which I understand are really the best. And I think the next time I do a figure, that's what I'll go for, because even though the detail on this figure, which comes from the Dragon 1945 U.S. Army Tank Riders kit, is pretty good, and the detail is definitely better than the Tamiya figures that came with the kit, and which really wouldn't have worked anyway unless I'd modified it a lot to get this pose. It still was not the kind of detail that I hear people talk about with Hornet heads, where basically they almost paint themselves because the features are so crisp. So at any rate, I feel like it's good enough, and especially since he's looking down and you can't really see his stupid looking little face. And I'm not going to feel compelled to zoom in any closer than this and show it to you. But hopefully you get the idea that, you know, he's taken a little bit of a bullet wound in the shoulder there, and he's bleeding a little bit, and that helps tell the story. Now, as for how he got his bullet wound, you know, he's gone out on his errand in his Jeep to deliver this gizmo that's here in the back of the Jeep, and that, as it happens, is the Norden bomb sight from my Accurate Miniatures B25 Mitchell kit, because the Mitchells on the Tokyo raid didn't use the Norden bomb sights, and they left them at home so that they couldn't fall into enemy hands if any of the planes were shot down. So that made a nice little gizmo, and I added some piping to it and made it appear as if it were leaking all over the back of this guy's Jeep. Now, the Jeep itself is the Tamiya 135th Jeep kit. And as for that kit itself, there's not a whole lot to say because it's classic Tamiya. The detail is outstanding. The engineering is really good. The fit of the parts is good. The mold quality is good. I mean, it's Tamiya. You know, that's what you expect. And I started this project because I wanted to do something with a ground vehicle. And then I had this little idea for this little ambush vignette, and I thought, oh, this will be pretty straightforward. I'll build the Tamiya Jeep, and that'll be pretty easy. And as much as can be captured in that statement, it was. But there's always a but. I love me some detail, and I just can't resist adding it. And so I bought the Edward photo etch kit for this little Jeep, which is really good and gives you a ton of parts, a lot more parts than I needed, because basically what I wanted was to make sure that I had good detail on the dashboard and on the fixtures and so forth around the outsides of this thing. So I used the Edward photo etch kit and did the details on the dash, but the thing that photo etch never gives you is any real depth, and there's a lot of little knobs and things on this dash that you're not going to get from photo etch. And so what I did is on here, maybe you can see these, I cut little pieces of stretched sprue and glued those on there, and I think that's always a good technique for that type of detail. I also wanted to duplicate the loops for the safety cable that was pretty much discarded on all Jeep pictures that I've seen, but the loop was always still there. And I needed to make basically a round eye bolt, so I just formed that out of some silver wire. I also used lead wire to form the, flip this around here, to form the vacuum hose for the windshield wipers. Hopefully you can see that running around the edge of the windshield there. And as usual, lead wire works really good for that sort of thing. As for the rest of the Jeep, I really didn't do a whole lot. I mean, it was like I said, pretty straightforward. I just used the Edward parts where they were appropriate, like for the spare tire mount and for some of the handles and brackets and things that go on the outside here. And really the only other major thing that I had to do to the Jeep to make it fit the story was the wheels. Now, these wheels are not the stock wheels that come with the kit. They are Def Model resin wheels. And hang on a second, I'm over here fishing around in my box for the original parts, so you can see the difference. I love Def Model resin wheels. Every one of their products I've used has been really good. The detail is just excellent. And you can see the difference here. If you look at the stock parts, you can see that they're not bad, but there's no lettering on the sides of the tires, and the tread detail is not nearly as crisp as it is on these Def Model parts. The only negative that I found with them is that the mounting hole was a little too small for the Tamiya axle, and I just drilled it out, so no big deal. I also, hopefully you can see it, added valve stems to all of them, which I think is a really nice little bit of detail that adds a lot of realism. You can see it on the bottom of that rear wheel right there. And I just do that by drilling a hole at a real shallow angle and putting a short length of silver wire in there with super glue, and then snipping it off to the appropriate length. And I think that makes a nice little addition to the detail level. Now, the other thing that I'm sure you're noticing about these tires is that they're flat, and no, they did not come that way. But I had to flatten both of these driver's side or passenger side tires to tell the story of this guy being ambushed and being shot up a little bit. And so what I did there is I used my trusty Zona razor saw, and I'll show you that because it is just a fantastic tool. It cuts resin like butter. And I use the 24 tooth per inch one. It seems to work really well. And here it is. It's, like I said, it's a great tool. It cost me about 20 bucks, and it's well worth it every time I use it. So what I did is I just chopped off the bottom of each of those two tires, and then I molded the pooched out portion with Abe's epoxy sculpt, which I've got right here. And this stuff is really cool. It's basically a two-part epoxy putty that you basically just peel off little chunks of it. It's got the consistency of cookie dough, I suppose. And so you just peel off little chunks of it and knead it together like Play-Doh until it's a uniform color. And then you've got at least an hour, probably more, to work with it and form it into shape before it hardens. And it does get super hard and becomes sandable and drillable and all of that. But the nice thing is that in the meantime, before it cures, it's essentially water soluble, and so you can use a wet brush dipped in water to work the shape and smooth your surfaces as it's curing, and that definitely makes things easier for somebody like me who knows nothing about sculpting. So I'll leave it up to you guys to tell me if you think that I did a good job of making flat tires that look realistic. I've seen plenty of them in my life, unfortunately. So I think that they came out pretty good, but you know, I try not to judge these things definitively for myself. Okay, now the third major component of this little vignette obviously was the base. And that was the thing that I chose to do last. And it was really a lot of fun. I started out with this block of walnut that I got from this little wood supplier in Virginia that sells trophy bases. And it was a little spendy, but I think that for something like this, I wanted it to be really nice, and I wanted it to be simple and good quality. So this worked out well. It's finished with my favorite wood finishing product, which is called Watco Danish oil. And that's what's known as a penetrating oil. It soaks into the wood before it cures, and so it gives you a really nice coloring, but leaves you with a natural finish. It's not glossy like a surface varnish would be, and I really like that. The next thing I did was I took some cardboard and basically cut out a contour model of this road surface. And I glued all that on there. And then I covered it over with a mixture of DAP spackling compound, which you can get at any hardware store. It's water soluble. And some water, and that was pretty easy to work, and I just smoothed it around and made all the contours look like what I felt like they needed to, but that still left me with an undressed edge all the way around, and I obviously didn't want the cardboard showing. And so I again went back to the epoxy sculpt and used that to create an edge that I could work and shape into something that would be nice and clean. But before I did that, because I obviously didn't want to get it all over this wood surface, I used some liquid frisket masking fluid on here to protect the wood from all the subsequent steps. And so once I had the shape of the ground the way I wanted it, what I did is then I painted it with some Model Master Dark Earth, which I chose because I knew that I was going for a light colored dirt. What I was basically trying to model this as was something that you might find, say, in some parts of the Mediterranean, where it's a really dry climate and it has this light colored limestone type soil, which we, where I live, call caliche. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do that, because I knew that I could get that kind of dirt from the road right out here near my house. And, I know how that dirt behaves. I've driven over it my entire life. So I know that it gets packed down really hard. And even after a rainstorm, you can have places where there are puddles, like I have here, and yet still be in dusty conditions. And that's what I was trying to replicate. So, it's a hard-packed surface that's dry, but still has some water standing on it. And that helps to explain the mud that I've got splattered all over the Jeep. And let me sort of back up and tell you how I made the mud. That's basically just a thin mixture of water, a spackling compound, and Ultimate Modeling Products light dirt clay wash. And I just thinned it enough to where I could splatter it on there with a toothbrush, and that worked really well, although I did have to do it twice, because the first time when I sprayed clear matte varnish on it, most of it disappeared, and so I had to redo it. And the second go around, I used ammo of Mig Jimenez pigment fixer, which I have decided is like magic juice for doing this kind of stuff, because it'll secure pigment and even little bits of dirt without affecting their appearance. So I really like it. It's very good. So at any rate, the first thing I had to do on the base after I laid the paint down was put on a layer of real dirt. And I had collected some actual dirt from the Caliche Road, and I had ground it up super fine in a cheap little $15 coffee grinder that I got from Walmart. And that made it pretty fine. Not as fine as pigment, but fine enough to make a good base layer. And once I had that down, then I started working in pigments and rocks and different things to give me some tonal variation and some texture variation. Then it was time to put the grass on. And the grass that I used was originally going to be a grass mat with autumn colored grass. And I chose that because I wanted it for the overall color balance. I wanted something that would integrate with the olive drab of the Jeep, but still allow the Jeep to stand out as the main focal point. So I chose the autumn colored grass mat from MIG, but it was too thick to use in a situation like this. It just stood up too tall, and there wasn't any good way to blend it in texturally to the surrounding dirt. So I found this stuff on Amazon, and it comes just on a little clear piece of film, and you just peel it off, dip it in glue, and stick it on, and it's amazing. Such a cool little product, and I think very realistic looking, especially when you combine it with a few little bits of wood and some rocks and things. So, and because it's, each individual tuft is separate, it allows you to have a lot of control over how you place it and hopefully get a real natural and random placement, but still be, thick enough to really look good. So, once I had all the grass stuck on there, then it was time to create my water puddle. And for that, I originally used some Future mixed with pigment, and that didn't work because it just shrank and sunk into where it was almost non-existent. So I came back with some epoxy mixed with pigment, and that worked fine, except that it was too dark. It just didn't look natural. So I came back over that with a mixture of Future and some dark earth paint to match the tones that I already had, and basically just painted over the top of it and blended it in, and I think that came out a lot more realistic and a lot more effectively. I also created tried to create the idea that he's taken a bullet through the radiator here, and all of the water has spilled out on the ground there and collected underneath the front of the Jeep. And I just did that with some, actually, I used the MIG Earth effect, which is just basically an enamel paint with a bunch of pigment mixed into it, and that worked okay. So I think that really all I did after that was just a lot of tweaking, adding a lot of rocks and pigments, and just doing different things to really try and integrate it. I also made sure to come back with pigment and put all over the Jeep after it was glued down, and especially on the wheels. And I didn't use any fixer for that because I haven't found a way to use even fixer, as good as it is, on really thin layers of pigment without altering the appearance. It works great for thicker pigment applications. Like I used fixer right here where it's collected in the crook of that fender, but I've found that for putting a dust layer on tires that it's just too much. So, but I don't worry about that, because what I've found is that when you take and really rub that pigment in with the tip of an old paintbrush or a Q-tip, it gets stuck on there pretty good, and it even will resist fingerprints for the most part, as long as your fingertips aren't sweaty or covered in grease or anything. And look, the reality is you shouldn't be touching this thing past a certain point anyway. So I like to put pigments on as the very last step and not use any sort of varnish or fixer, because they retain that dusty textural appearance that for me is important to the realism of the whole thing. So that hopefully covers pretty much everything that I did to build this, and hopefully there's some good information in there if you're looking to do something like this yourself. So there you go. That's my piece that I suppose, if I were going to give it a title, if I were inclined to do that sort of thing, I might call The Ambush or The Sniper. Who knows? Hopefully I managed to tell that story effectively. I'll leave it up to you guys to let me know if I did or didn't. Regardless, it was a really good learning experience for me, and I enjoyed it a lot. making a diorama base is, for me, a lot of fun because it's just totally freeform. It's completely up to you where you take your creative vision and how you accomplish your end goal, and there's no instructions to follow. So I thought that was a lot of fun and kind of a nice change from from following the instructions. And hopefully what I learned and what I showed you guys there is interesting and informative. All right, as usual, I really appreciate it if you guys stuck through all that, and I hope you'll stay tuned for whatever comes next. All right, take care. Much love.